Okay, we're live. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Google Advanced live stream sessions, where we today will focus on smart bidding. My name is Alex. I'm an account manager here at Google, working for the Swedish market, and I'll be your host for today's session. And with me, I have the one and only Nima Rajabi, who works here as a search specialist and actually specifically with smart bidding. So I think I found the right guy to accompany me here in the sofa today.
Hopefully.
Nima, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
So we're both situated in Dublin. So obviously we had St. Patrick's Day this weekend. Do you want to just share how your weekend was there, Nima?
It was amazing. It was my first time celebrating St. Patrick's in Ireland, and the people and the atmosphere and the food, like everything was just great. I had a lovely weekend. What about you?
Great, happy to hear. No, the same. A few cheeky pints, but nothing too wild, I would say.
Okay.
A few nice brunches and dinners, so all good.
That's great.
Okay, Nima, you work as a search specialist here at Google. Do you want to just share briefly then maybe what does that role entail?
Well, that's a good question. So my job is to more or less make sure that you're happy with all of our search products, that they are performing well and meeting your expectations. And more specifically, I'm specialized in smart bidding, as you also mentioned. So I do know a lot about smart bidding. I work with a lot of clients across Northern Europe, implementing smart bidding, optimizing smart bidding. And that's also why I'm here today, to hopefully share some things that you might find interesting and insightful.
Perfect, Nima. Okay, guys, so this is the first out of 7 episodes that we will be running over the next coming 14 weeks. I would say the purpose of these sessions is to really go in depth on the latest Google Ads products, and we're going to cover products across all levels of the marketing funnel. Obviously, today kicking off then with smart bidding. And we want to make the sessions as interactive as a live stream can possibly be. So we're going to set aside 25 minutes for Nima to run through his presentation on smart bidding, and then we're going to open up to questions from the audience. So we're going to have a 15-20 minute Q&A. So some of you already posted some questions earlier from the form that we sent out. Thanks a lot for submitting those. If you have any questions or you didn't have the chance to submit any questions beforehand, you can use the chat function here in the YouTube interface to ask any questions you may have throughout the session. Just be aware that your question and name will be public, so refrain from asking any sensitive questions or those specific to your business, and instead keep those to discuss it with your account manager after the session. So Nima will be going through quite a lot today. So just so you know, everyone who registered for this session will get the slides sent to them after, and we will also make a recording of this session so you can go back and watch this afterwards. But if you're not watching the live stream version, be aware that will not be including the Q&A part in the recorded version. Okay, I think that was all the practical information from my side. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and I'll now pass it on to Nima to take us through smart bidding.
Thank you very much, and for the nice introduction. So as I mentioned, I'm very excited about the agenda today because I get to share a lot of best practices. We're going to start off by just briefly going through why it makes sense and why we should automate bidding. And then afterwards, I think one of the questions that I've been getting a lot from many clients is how the smart bidding actually works, what happens behind the scenes. So we're going to get a little bit down in the nitty gritty, which I hope is okay, to understand like what's going on, how does it work, and so forth. And then we're going to touch on how to evaluate smart bidding. So if you're considering implementing smart bidding or adding it to your campaigns, I'm going to present some best practices on how to measure and evaluate the performance, because there's some different ways of doing it. There's some great ways of doing it, and there's some less great way of doing it. And hopefully that'll help a lot if you're considering adding it, or if you want a great framework to actually evaluate the performance of the smart bidding. Then afterwards, I think it'll be nice to look at how do we optimize smart bidding, so smart bidding optimization. So once you added smart bidding, it is up and running, how do we get the full performance out of it? What are the things that we can still optimize and tweak in order to get the best results for our clients? And then at last, we'll just touch briefly on new features in smart bidding and things that you can look forward to. So all in all, we're going to get through a lot of things, and hopefully you're going to learn a lot. Let's get started, right?
Sounds like an exciting agenda. Maybe I'll learn a few things as well then.
Yeah, let's see. Cool. Okay, so we're going to start off with like a brief introduction to why you should automate. So some of you might have just recently started working with Google Ads. Many of you have worked with Google Ads for a lot of years. And you'll know that a while ago, bidding was pretty simple. It was all about keywords. So you find your keywords, you write a few ads, and that was, let's say 5 or 6 years ago, or maybe more. Everyone was living in a desktop-first world. It wasn't that complex, so there weren't that many signals. So bidding was relatively simple and not very complicated. But then what happened was that there was something new introduced in the market, and that was a smartphone, which enabled you to browse from the smartphone browser. And that also introduced a lot of new signals that we had to take into account. So like suddenly you had device types like an Apple, a tablet, a smartphone, a computer, people that had several devices. So suddenly you were cross-device. And also location, because the smartphone also enabled you to be in different locations, and there will be different times and weekdays. And all of these signals actually help us understand the context and intent behind the keywords, which also helped us set better bids. And then as time passed, even more signals has been added to the pool. So today, the path to a conversion can be way more complicated than it used to be. So we have like things like operating system, browser, ad creative, language. And all of these things adds a lot of complexity, but it also helps us bid more efficiently. And that's really where smart bidding comes into play, because smart bidding is able to take all of these signals into account and make sure that you always place the most efficient bid every time someone searches for a keyword. So it's not only about the keywords anymore, it's just as much about all of the different signals that really influence the intent behind each query that's been made in the search engine. So to just briefly sum up, the consumer today goes through a very complex journey across devices, across browsers, different times and location. So it's important to understand the identity of the user, the context, and the intent. And those three things are really where smart bidding comes into play, because it's able to analyze all of these signals in real time and place the best and most efficient bid for every auction. So I hope that clears up things a bit, and why automated bidding, or smart bidding as we call it, is so important these days. And I also know, to move on to the next subject, that a lot of clients and also agencies have been asking us, so how does it actually work? Like, how does smart bidding work? And before we get into the nitty-gritty, I think it would be a good idea to just present some of the solutions we have available today. So we more or less have a solution for every campaign goal that you might have. And we have 2 buckets of smart bidding solutions. One bucket is what we call the fully automated, and the second bucket is what we call the semi-automated solutions. And just to briefly explain the difference, so the fully automated solutions, such as target CPA, maximize conversions, target ROAS, target impression shares, you just put in your goal and you'll let the smart bidding do the work. And that doesn't mean that doesn't work as well or as good as with the semi-automated, but in the semi-automated, you still have the possibility to put in a bid and say, like, that is my maximum bid on average that I like to pay. And so I would say all the solutions are great. And we have a bidding solution for all of your goals. So it's really about figuring out, like, what is the goal of my campaign, right? How much would I like to pay for a conversion, or what is the return on advertising spend that I like on my campaigns? And then, like, picking the smart bidding solution that fits your need the most. Cool. So why should you add fully automated solutions? So what we do see is that when someone switches from manual bidding, manual CPC, to eCPC, we see 7% more conversions. I think that's great. That's quite nice. But we also see when you switch from manual CPC to a fully automated solution such as target CPA, you see a 31% increase in conversions. So if you're sitting out there right now and you're running manual campaigns, I would encourage you to switch directly to fully automated, because the amount of the incremental conversions is significantly larger than switching to a semi-automated. And on the other hand, if you're running eCPC today, or some of our semi-automated solutions, it's actually worth trying switching to fully automated, because there is like a significant increase in conversions to be obtained. So please do consider that. And we're going to get into how to test and how to apply these things. But it's just to say that we do see significant better results. And if you're on manual, switch to fully. If you're on semi-automated, consider switching to fully automated, fully automated smart bidding solution. Great. So I'll just start now briefly introducing like how does it work? What does it mean that it sets a bid? So as I mentioned before, there's a lot of different signals. And in the example here, you'll have a user who's searching for Amsterdam holidays. And one example is a high bid. So a user is searching from a Nexus tablet at 4 p.m. in Leeds using Firefox. And it has a misspelling in the word of the query, and it's visited the site last month. So at this point, we're actually able to predict the conversion rate of this user. So we'll know this user is very likely to convert. It has a high conversion rate. So we're going to bid higher. On the other hand, we might have another user who's bidding, who's putting in the query Amsterdam holidays from a desktop at 7 p.m. in London using Chrome. And we're going to put in a lower bid. And the reason behind that is because we are actually able to predict the conversion rate on the users as they make the query inside Google. And therefore, you shouldn't think of smart bidding as something that just sets a given bid on one day or an interval of hours. For every auction, every time someone puts a query inside Google, there's a prediction going on using all of the signals we spoke about before to figure out how likely is this user to convert.
And then you mean it's very hard to manually bid adjust for all these different signals, right?
It definitely is. Yeah. And that really ties back to the world we're living in today with all of these signals at hand. You need some way to handle the complexity. And by setting the bids more efficiently, you get more conversions to the same price per conversion and often also lower. So yeah, true auction time optimization, as we call it. And to give some more context, so on one side, we have the signals that are available today to most platforms and third parties and modifiers. That is geography, device, time, and remarketing list. And the thing is, when you add smart bidding, you get a lot of new exclusive signals that is being added to the mix, which increases efficiency, such as language, browser, operating system, ad format, search partners, and search queries. So there's a lot of more signals in the mix when you apply smart bidding than if you just add normal modifiers or third-party tools. I think that's very important to understand here. So we already touched a bit upon how it's a moving target, right? The bid is always different. So I'd like to just go a bit into the nitty-gritty of how exactly does target CPA and target ROAS work, to give you kind of an understanding of what goes on behind the scenes. So for target CPA, as we already mentioned, there's a lot of contextual signals, so there's a lot of things in play. But the one thing that I want you to at least be aware of is that we have something called predicted conversion rate. So every time someone puts in a query in Google and searching for something, we use the signals to predict how likely is this user to convert. So different users will have different context and different intentions, and they will also have different conversion rates. So depending on the conversion rate, it will bid higher or lower. On the other hand, we also have to take into account your CPA. So we need to make sure that we also bid accordingly with the CPA, the cost per acquisition that you defined in your bid. So that is what's happening in the engine room. All of these signals are being analyzed in real time, and then a predicted conversion rate is being set. And then our smart bidding solution will actually determine it. Is this click actually worth bidding higher for or lower for? So you'll actually often see that sometimes you might have a small reduction in clicks when you evaluate the smart bidding performance. And that's not a bad thing, because you're bidding for the clicks that are valuable and not for the clicks that most likely wouldn't convert. I think that's really cool. So that's how I would go about thinking about what's actually going on. How does the algorithm think? Of course, it's way more complex than this, but this is a simplified way to put it in. And remember, it happens in real time. The search query. Now, for target ROAS, just to change things around, it's the exact same thing again. But one thing that we added above the bid is the predicted conversion value. because in target ROAS, we want a certain amount of money on our advertising spend. So we don't only look at the conversion rate, but also at the value of each user. So we're able to predict how likely is Alex, how likely is he to convert on some running shoes, and what is the predicted conversion value of the search that he's making. Because again, you want to make sure that you actually bid on users who are going to spend the amount of money that would make up your target ROAS bid. So I hope I didn't confuse you, and it's simple, but think about it as Google being able to predict how likely a user is to convert and how big the conversion value is per click. Now, we had a few things now about like why we should automate and the benefits of automating and what's going on behind the scene. And I think, Alex, maybe you have some experience on evaluating smart bidding performance. There are like different ways to do that. And I will go through 3 ways of evaluating. The first 2 I would recommend. So one way is just applying it directly. So you just say, okay, I have a campaign. I'd like to try target CPA. I'm going to apply target CPA directly. And then I'm going to use the bid strategy report to analyze the performance. Another way to go about it is to use drafts and experiments. Again, there's no right or wrong. If you want to use drafts and experiments, you also have the ability to see like and do a metric analysis. How does it impact the different metrics? So I might hit my target ROAS or my target CPA, but how does it impact my impressions and clicks? And that's really where we recommend using drafts and experiments, because that's a scientific way of reaching significance on the goals as well. The third way is something that I'm guilty of. I've been doing this in the past as well, and I'll definitely not recommend that. And I know a lot of people do it as well, but that's doing a pre-post metric analysis. I'm going to get into that and why it doesn't make sense. So just to start off, one way to go about adding smart bidding is just to apply it directly to the campaign and use the bid strategy report. So when you apply a smart bidding campaign, here's an example where I apply target ROAS directly to the campaign. When you click on campaigns, you'll have a column called bid strategy type. And you can actually click on the target ROAS and you'll be able to view a bid strategy report. And that report is actually pretty cool. And a lot of new features are being added to it continuously. So inside this report, once you added the smart bidding, you'll actually be able to see what is the average target CPA. So on average, what have the algorithm been optimizing for? The CPA. It might be that you've changed the CPAs a couple of times, so therefore the average is different than the actual CPA. The actual CPA is just all the conversions divided by cost. So how much does it cost to get a conversion? Now, the reason why I really like the bid strategy report is because you get like a timeline and you can see how things are moving and such. And if we go to the next slide, you'll see in the bottom, there's like this gray line. This gray line actually gives you some insights. So in this case, it'll tell you this is the period where we had the ramp up. So this was when the algorithm was ramping up. So it actually informs you on the go what's going on behind the scenes, how is the algorithm working. And on the same hand, you also see on the right side, now I'm hovering above the blue line, and you'll get some insights where it'll tell you, hey, actually, if you're looking at this period where you actually see the CPA is increasing a bit, you need to be aware of one thing. And that's you have a 16 days conversion lag or conversion cycle. And that's the time from a user clicked on an ad until they convert, or they've seen an impression until they convert.
I think this is like, I don't think many advertisers actually know about the bid strategy report. Like not many, I haven't discussed it too much with my advertisers. So is this something, Nima, we have to whitelist for? Is it already available in the accounts?
No, it's available. So if you're running smart bidding, using one of our smart bidding solutions today, like after this session, like go into the campaign and look in the reports and see if there's anything that you might not know today. Like there's a lot of great insights inside of that, and I know the product team is constantly improving it. So in this example, you can see the CPA went up, but you also have the line telling you, hey, wait a second. Be aware that you need to wait 16 days until you'll see what the actual CPA is because of the conversion lag. But everyone has access to it. So if you applied smart bidding, you'll be able to see it on campaign level.
Okay.
Now, the second way to go about evaluating smart bidding is creating a draft and experiment. So there's different ways of really thinking about evaluating. And I think this is, if you don't feel comfortable adding it directly, you can test it. So we have a framework in mind when we test smart bidding, and that framework goes as the following. First, you need to identify the right campaigns to test. I usually recommend between 3 or 5 campaigns because you're going to see different results from campaign to campaign. So if you only choose one, you might miss out on some other campaigns that would have otherwise given you great results. The next thing you have to take into account after you identify the right campaigns is the ramp-up period. So this is the time that it takes our algorithm to ramp up analyzing your campaign performance and keywords. So please have that in mind. That doesn't mean that the smart bidding performance will be off or bad. You're just going to see a lot of fluctuation because the algorithm is getting used to your setup. So there's 2 weeks in general. Sometimes it's shorter. It depends on the conversion. So take that into account. After those 2 weeks, you have 6 weeks of what we call full performance. And full performance, that's where you really see things like there you see the performance going, like it's ramped up the algorithm and everything is working. And then after that, you have the evaluation. And when you do the evaluation, again, take into account the conversion cycle. So if you're looking at March and you're at the end of March and you have 16 days or maybe 7 days from click to conversion, you need to wait 7 days at least to get the right picture.
And that's the information we then saw from the bid strategy report when it gray marked the learning period and then the blue part for the conversion lag, I guess.
Exactly, okay. Exactly. And that's why I usually say to clients, if you feel comfortable, just add it and monitor through the bid strategy report because it'll tell you what's going on. Now, if you use the drafting experiments, we have the recommendations tab that we also call OptiScore. It'll actually show you the campaigns that are best suited for adding smart bidding and the solution. Right now, we only show target CPA and eCPC, but we will soon be launching target ROAS as well.
Could we assume then, so if I'm tracking conversion value in my account, so revenue, and it suggests me to change over to target CPA, can I also take that as a suggestion that I can also change this to target ROAS, even though it doesn't specifically say so in the OptiScore?
Yeah, okay. You can do that.
That's a great way to identify what campaigns to try it on then, I guess.
Exactly. And as you can see, it's a relatively new function, but you can hover over the plus 2,000 conversions, and you can actually see how many conversions can you expect with target CPA compared to the bidding strategy you use now. And you can go even further down and look at campaign level. How much more conversions would I get for an individual campaign adding the smart bidding? How much would each conversion cost? And what is the increase or decrease in weekly cost? And you will actually see that sometimes we'll decrease the cost per conversion, sometimes it'll increase, and the same thing with the weekly cost, it can increase and decrease as well. So the recommendations tab in the OptiScore is a fantastic place to find these opportunities. And the way that it actually works is that we're analyzing all the auctions you've been in the last 7 days, and then we're simulating what would have happened if in X amount of the auctions you applied the smart bidding. So it's not guesswork, it's actually statistics and machine learning that's behind these suggestions.
Okay.
And so once you decide and identify the campaigns that you want to add the smart bidding to, then you can set up the drafting experiments in a few clicks. It's really not hard. It's just going inside drafting experiments, selecting the campaign that you want to add smart bidding to, going inside the settings and changing the bid strategy.
Because I often hear from my advertisers that there's a lot of work to set up the drafts and experiments, but I think we've simplified that process, or at least it's kind of maybe it's a myth.
No, I mean, I would definitely say that it is easy today and it's relatively fast. And on the other hand, if, as you've seen before inside the OptiScore and recommendation tab, you actually have the ability to view all and apply all as well. And if you want to do the drafting experiments, I mean, reach out to your account manager and he might be able to maybe activate some support if you feel like there's something that you're unsure about or something that you need a bit more guidance on. But it should be pretty straightforward. And I know that it's going to be even more easy in the future to do this. Cool. So once you add the smart bidding, then you have the ramp up period as we spoke about before. So the status will be learning. And it's very important to understand that learning doesn't mean that it won't perform or it's performing poorly. It's just going to fluctuate a lot because it's trying to understand, depending on your bid and your campaign data, how should it act in the auctions? How should it set the bid? So I wouldn't be concerned, but just take into account in the learning period, don't do any significant budget change. Don't do any major keyword additions. Don't do any landing pages swap. Basically, you have to keep things stable for a while as it's ramping up. And yeah, that's my recommendation for sure.
So if you did say changes on the bid, so you have a CPA and you want to adjust your CPA, how much would you kind of increase or decrease that CPA at the time?
That's a great question. So if you have to do a change in your target, I would say look at your conversion cycle, and a general rule of thumb is changes by 20% for each conversion cycle. So if your conversion cycle is 7 days, you can change it with 20% every 7 days.
Okay.
Again, I wouldn't recommend changing so much in the learning period, but after that, change it. And again, be wary of very significant changes above that, because that could send it back to learning mode again for a few days or maybe a few hours. So yeah, after you run the experiment and you reach significance and you've seen the 6 weeks and you added the conversion cycle as well, then you'll be able to see how it performed inside the drafting experiments, and you can see not only did it reach my target, did I hit my target ROAS or my target CPA, but also how did it influence impressions and clicks and cost per conversions. So again, if you don't feel comfortable adding it directly, you can go through the drafting experiments and you'll be able to see all the different metrics.
These are very interesting numbers. So here we've seen then that impressions and clicks have actually gone down, but conversions have got up, and arguably that's the most important thing, right?
Yeah. So I know that like for a long time we used to look at CTRs and clicks and impressions, but our smart bidding solution, they take into account what is your business goal. Like if it's success for you to acquire a conversion at a certain cost, that's what it's going to optimize for, and that's what you're going to get. And the same with ROAS. So as I said, don't be wary of falling into the trap of saying, oh, I have like a small decrease in clicks, or I have like 10% decrease in clicks, but you have a 10% increase in conversion. And that's because, as we've gone through earlier in the presentation, it's predicting every query that is made. And if it has a low conversion rate, it might not bid a bit high for it, and might not bid a lot. So you're actually missing out on traffic that was not converting or not converting at a very low conversion rate. So it could be a good thing as well. Yeah. Now, the last thing I want to go through is what I do not recommend doing. And as I said, I've been guilty of doing this in the past as well, many years ago. So there's nothing wrong. I do understand why a lot of customers, a lot of agency go about doing it like that. But it's what I call the pre-post metric analysis. And that's simply where you look at the performance of smart bidding and you compare it maybe to the month before. So you apply it and you compare it to the month before. And then you'll see that, oh, maybe clicks gone up or impressions gone up or something changed. And the reason why I won't recommend this way, as many of you maybe already know, is that there's so many variables in play that you can't just compare from one month to the previous month. There's seasonality, there's competition. So my advice is, if it's important for you to know how all the different metrics are impacted, use the drafting experiments. You can do a 50-50% split in the traffic. You can do an 80-20% split. But the thing is, we want to make sure, if you want to understand how these metrics are impacted, do it under like stable conditions and do it through drafting experience, which is built for this purpose. And
we mainly suggest, right, doing it a 50-50 split budget.
Yeah, you can do a 50-50. If you feel uncomfortable, you can do it 80-20. It'll just take a bit more time before you reach the result, depending on the traffic. But yeah, definitely, do not do a pre-post metric analysis. Even if you don't want to understand how it impacts the metrics, do the drafting experiments. That's really if there's one key takeaway from this presentation about how to evaluate, don't do pre-post metric analysis. Please don't.
Got it.
and we also seen that people have been doing it and they saw like brilliant results. So maybe they say, oh, conversion's gone up 20%, but it's due to seasonality. Yeah. So you want to know more or less, even if it's bad or good, you want to test it during the drafting experiments to be sure that you're looking at the right data when you make a big decisions about your bid strategy. So smart bidding optimization is one of the last things we're going to go through. Once you implement it and you're happy with the results, how do you take things to the next level? And one thing to go about thinking is, as we already mentioned, every search in Google is unique. You have different device, location, time, day of week. And therefore, like every ad is relevant for each specific search or context. And there's been a misconception, and again, I've been a victim of this misconception in the past myself, that if you have one ad with a high CTR and a high conversion rate, that's great. That's the way it should be. But as you can see on the slide now, that one ad might only be eligible to run for certain people in your ad group with your keyword. So yes, you have a great conversion rate and a great CTR and all of these things on one ad inside the ad group, but the ad won't be displayed on a lot of queries that are also relevant to the keyword due to this. So if you want to optimize smart bidding, my suggestion is make sure you have more than one expanded text ads, preferably 3 expanded text ads or 2, because that will really allow you, and make sure there's variation, because as I said, not every ad is relevant to every person in a different context. And one way to think about it is you might have people who are interested in price, some are interested in quality, some are interested in an ad about like a local store, so information about opening hours, while some are interested about how is that available in the web shop. So what we usually see is that when you have one ETA, even though it's performing great, you're missing out on a lot of clicks. So if you have 3 ETAs or 3 expanded text ads that are different from each other, they will also have different CTRs and conversion rate. And the reason why they're different, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but the reason why they're different is that they're being displayed to different queries in different contexts. So you might have an ETA with great performance, and then you might have one where the conversion rate is lower. That's not a bad thing because it's being displayed to auctions that you weren't eligible to run in beforehand. And the last thing is make sure that every ad group also have a responsive search ads. That is really our flagship product because it allows you to create up to 15 headlines and multiple descriptions. And again, that gives you that extra incremental reach on the queries. So if you want to optimize smart bidding, make sure you have the ad creatives in place.
Cool. And we're actually running a session in 2 weeks' time. So on Tuesday, the 2nd of April at 10:11 Central European time, so the same time as now, on smart creative, so including RSA. So I think that could be a good complement to this session.
That's fantastic. So keep that in mind. Optimization, go directly to the ads and start optimizing. The last thing that is important is to have audiences added. We just recently announced that we automatically in our smart bidding solution take into account the Google audiences, so the demographics, the affinity audiences, the in-market audiences. But make sure that you've added like your remarketing list. In many cases, we see that conversion rate can increase with up to 30% by adding the right remarketing list. So cart abandoners, products, categories, all of these things, make sure you add that at campaign level to each of your campaigns.
So these first audiences measured, I think that's quite a new thing and probably something not many people are aware of. Those are now added automatically if you use Target ROAS and Target CPA. Okay.
Yeah.
But you do suggest that we add them to the campaign still, right? For measurement purposes.
Yeah. So I would say, even though they are included, it can make sense, and I would recommend to add them because you still get the insights. And sometimes our advertisers will be surprised to know like what's actually going on. Where's my traffic coming from? One great example was a real estate client who found out that a majority of their clients coming to the website are actually also in the categories of single people. And that helped them make decisions in the marketing. So it's free insights. So my recommendation would be, even though some of them are included, add them anyway to get the insights. And you might also use them in your ad creation where you can use if functions. So you can say, if it's in this audience, then display this ad text or ad copy in the ad. So there's also other reasons or other ways to leverage adding in. So make sure you add all the audiences as well. The last thing I want to go by before we end off is some new features. One of the features that I'm super excited about is smart bidding seasonality controls and data exclusions. I just want to make sure that I set expectations straight. Smart bidding is able to catch up with most seasonal events. And we saw last year that we didn't have any problems with Black Friday. It more or less went smoothly. But the thing is that we want to give our advertisers the opportunity to tell our smart bidding solutions, I expect that something significant is going to happen within 24 or 48 hours to my conversion rate. So it might be, I expect the conversion rate to increase with 50%. Then with the seasonality controls, you're actually able to tell a smart bidding solution and the algorithm, there's something crazy, not crazy, but something great is going to happen. Be aware. And at the same time, with data exclusions, you're also able to, through our support team, you're able to actually tell our algorithm, those 2 days, should not be accounted in how you make decisions on bidding moving forward. They are exceptional. They shouldn't be influencing how you make decisions afterwards.
So it's not I think that's a common misconception, because sometimes I feel our advertisers think, okay, just because there's a spike in traffic, our smart bidding solution doesn't work and we need to do the adjustments. But it's actually if the conversion rate changes drastically, that's when we need to make adjustments.
Yes, exactly.
And just the data exclusions I find quite interesting. So that's something you can contact our support team and they'll be happy to exclude those straight away.
Yeah. So the last,
and just on the last part. So this is still a beta, right? So if you want to do the seasonality adjustments, you can reach out to your account representatives, and I'm sure they'll be happy to help you there.
Exactly. And the last new feature that I want to run by is something we already touched upon, is that the audience signals or the Google audience signals are now included in the smart bidding. So that's in-market search audiences, detailed demographic, and affinity audience. Those are now part of the algorithm. And then when it makes the bids, it takes into account this particular audience. What is the conversion rate on this audience, or what is the average conversion value? Again, I still recommend to add them. I also still recommend to add the other audiences as remarketing list and customer match, but it's taken into account already. You don't have to do anything. So it's already included.
Okay, yeah, so it says beta here on the slide, but that's because it's in an early stage of adoption. So it's nothing we need to whitelist for. It's already there in all the accounts.
Yeah, so it happens automatically.
Cool.
That was a lot of things.
Okay.
We went through. I hope you learned a lot. I think we've gone through, a lot of different stages at smart bidding, and
I think even I learned a few things here. No, thank you. Thanks a lot there, Nima. So great. We're now going to open up then for questions. So you can still use the chat function here in the YouTube interface to post any questions. But like I mentioned earlier, be aware that your comments will be public. So please refrain from asking any sensitive questions. I would bring those to your account manager instead after the session.